Hi everyone, so this is a subject I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and that's, is there a STEM bubble? And the reason I bring this up is because when I got into STEM and now, it seems like everyone is pushing for STEM, from presidents of the United States on both sides to schools and parents, and everyone seems to want to get people into STEM. So I always kind of figured, well, isn't that just going to lead to there being too many people in STEM and those fields becoming oversaturated? Well, I actually don't think it will after doing analysis of it, and here's why. So it's easy to think, well, only so many people can be engineers, only so many people can be programmers. That's a kind of common way of thinking, that you can't just have everyone in the world doing that one thing or those things, and that is true. People say, well, we need garbage men, we need people to clean houses, we need people to install plumbing, and that is all true. But when it comes to things like that, we used to have things that we'd say, we need people to do this, and now we're starting to question it. Like, we need people to drive trucks. Well, now we're starting to think, maybe we might not need that. We used to say we need people to build cars. Nowadays, we kind of know we don't actually need that many people to do it. Now, one thing that's out there, and I'm not calling this a myth, but there's a lot of myth in it, is that we would have a lot more manufacturing jobs in this country if we hadn't shipped them overseas. Well, there is truth to that, and there are manufacturing jobs that have gone overseas. But there's a lot more that have simply been automated away. And that's to say, we don't need a person to do it anymore because there is a machine that can do it now. And that came from STEM. So you might be wondering, why is there such a hard push for STEM? And that's because we kind of see the future continuing in that direction, but it kind of exponentially gets that way more and more. Let me sort of explain what I'm saying. So a long time ago, we used to just hunter-gather, and we would try to provide for ourselves and others shelter, food, and water. And so those are things that people need, and we would try to find ways to provide those. Not too far into that, we started making tools. For tools, we needed rocks. I'm just going to call them rocks, although I realize that they're materials and a lot of other stuff. So we started getting rocks. We would gather rocks. Someone could do that. Someone would tool the rocks, turn the rocks into something that could be useful to us, and then we would use the rocks and we could better provide for ourselves. And at some point, we taught a rock more or less how to think, or at least how to calculate. At the same time, we got better at having rocks do things. So now we have rocks that can gather rocks for us. We have rocks that can tool rocks for us, and we no longer need a person to do that. Now, that's a huge, massive oversimplification, and obviously we still do have people involved with gathering different kinds of rocks, but we need it much, much less than we used to, and we consider that that trend will continue to where we actually are looking at a future, a not so distant future, where we need more people to tell the rocks what to do than we need people to gather and make them. And that is to say this, I've been doing 3D printing, and I have a 3D printer made by Prusa Research, where a good amount of the printer was 3D printed. So the rock that makes the tools, that uses rocks to make more tools, is actually making more of itself, that can make more and more and more. Now, that is not completely automated at this point, and there are still people involved in that process. But one thing we do today in industry is we attempt to find ways to manufacture things more easily. And as you may know, a 3D printer can't make everything that we need, but here's the scary thing. It's getting to be more that way. Where I work, we have a 3D printer that can print metal. So metallurgy and metalworking is still its own field that you can get into, but it may be less and less, because if we can make a printer that can print these metal products, and we can set it to do that all night long, and we can give it the same set of instructions, give 10 of them, 20 of them, 100, 1,000 of them, the same instructions, and they will all do exactly the same thing perfectly, and they will do it for less cost than paying someone's salary over time. That is what we're going to do. And that is sort of how our society has become focused. When you hear people talking about STEM and needing to get into STEM, and we need to get more people into STEM, it's very easy to think, well, you know, they're just overhyping this. There's no way all these people can just be engineers or mathematicians or programmers. There's just no way. Like, we don't need that many people. But, you know, we sort of do. Because the one thing that the rocks can't do is figure out what we want, or what we need to do, or what will be good for us. And honestly, sometimes we can't either. But the ability to communicate with the rocks, and again, I'm talking about a computer and calling it a rock. This is a bit of a joke that a processor is basically just a rock that we tricked into thinking. But it's more valuable to be able to communicate with the rock today. It's more productive. It lends more to society than being able to do what the rock does. And by that, I mean the ability to produce something with your hands that the machine can do. Because the machine can do it faster, the machine can do it cheaper, and the machine can do it better. And that is what you see happening, is we realize a lot of these things that we had have gone away, and a lot of the things that we have now are very likely to. So trucking is a big one that we look at a lot. That's a huge industry, and it's something that you can get into with fairly little education and make a decent living. So yes, it's scary to think that, you know, something that's already fairly mechanized, transporting goods would have had to have been done with horses and wagons, and have actually been a more technical job back then than when you're driving a truck. This is already something that's been incredibly heavily machined to make the job more automated. And now we're just saying it's time to automate the last part of it. We're just going to have now a computer do all of it. And this is what you're going to see in the future. At least this is what we think that you're going to see. We think over time these fields are going to eclipse and close, that we will not have people actually doing the things that humans need. We're going to have rocks doing it. We're going to have machines doing it and computers doing it. Mostly computers working with machines. And take, you know, times where we don't actually have a machine involved, you know, as you think of a machine, something with motors and it moves. Communication. So communication used to be a thing that was more done by people. Mail carriers used to take paper letters and give them to you know, different people that needed to talk to one another. Well, that's still true. We still do that, but we really don't need to anymore. Today, we've set up these networks, and if I want to talk to someone, I can just communicate to them with my computer, which is, it is a machine, but a bit of a different type of a machine, to their computer, or their phone to my phone. And basically, that is kind of what we're seeing, that if you think it can't be done by a machine and it can't be done better, you may be wrong. Now, there's obviously some things that are probably not going to be done by a machine anytime in the near future, like anything that has to be done in someone's house, right? It's going to be hard to build a machine that can go into someone's house. Every house is different, and fix something or install something. So while that's not going away, it's also probably not going to grow. And when it comes to things like building furniture, that used to be something that you needed skilled craftsmen to do. Now, it can be done totally by machines and loaded onto a truck that now maybe one day driven to your location, or eventually it will end up there without the needs of human intervention. So that is the future we see, and we have the near past to back us up on this. Now, the other question is, doesn't that just mean we're not going to have enough jobs for everyone at all? Well, that's an easy thing to think, and it's a scary thing to think, but I actually don't think that's the case. And the reason is, we have plenty of problems to solve. It's not as though, you know, we're just going to go as far as we need to and stop. I mean, why would we? We've got, human capital that can be used. Why would we let it just sit there and fester when we have problems that we need to solve? A lot of problems. I mean, take climate change. That's something that we don't necessarily think we have to do, right? It's more of a long-term problem, and we could just sit on our butts and not worry about it. But because we have this extra human capital that's been freed up, we can put people into figuring out how to optimize a system that doesn't necessarily need to be optimized for us to survive and be comfortable. We can take things like a car that works just fine on a gasoline engine and convert it to electricity, because we have this long-term problem that for a lot of us doesn't seem super threatening in the today and now, but we can do it because we've got human capital. And wouldn't we be better off doing that than just letting those people not have work and not do anything towards the future? We have space. I mean, I am a Star Trek fan, and we are nowhere near at the Starship Enterprise. We have people, they don't need to make cabinets anymore. Why don't we have them work on making that? We all want that, so we should work towards it. So I guess what I'm saying is that there's nothing necessarily wrong with this, although there is one huge problem with the whole thing. And that's that things like STEM degrees, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, they're trying to add art to it and make it STEAM. I'm actually okay with this, because this is also something that computers may not really be able to do that well. So why are these things, why is this combination sort of not great? What's the problem with it? Well, it's good in a lot of ways, but you have to have a certain level of intelligence to be able to do it. And I could be wrong on this, and actually I'm not even really making a decision. There might be a lot of people out there that are just not really talented in that direction, that they have a lot of talent. They're good at, like, say, working with their hands, but they're not the type of person to engineer things or do high-level math or even art. So that is a potential problem, and it's maybe something that we're yet to see. Can some level of the population, I guess is what I'm trying to say, can a higher level of the population, can more of the population do these types of jobs? Is this something that you have to kind of be born with the mind for? Or is this something that you can be taught into? And there are considerations in that you don't have to be perfect at it to be competent in it. And generally, when we're coming up, we tend to think about what are we good at, and we follow that. And if what we're good at isn't something that we can do for society, then we tend to find the next best thing. Well, if you're really good at doing something that isn't needed by society, but you're a mediocre programmer, that's not to say that you wouldn't be of more use to society as that mediocre programmer. And it's okay to not be great at something. And that's something that I think we may not be considering in that. But a huge fear is that what we're trying to do with the push to STEM won't work, and we're going to have droves of people who can't find employment and can't make a living and can't support themselves and can't be of use to society because we've just moved to these mentally intensive tasks that they're not cut out to do. And they're better at something that we automated away a long time ago. I certainly hope this isn't true, but what I'm trying to say here, if you are trying to get into STEM and you have had this worry like I have, I don't actually think this is something that you should be worried about. In fact, if anything, I would be worried about the opposite. Now, that's not to say there aren't areas that you can go into that are not considered STEM that will not be good careers for you in your life. But if you are going into STEM and you're worried that the field is just going to become completely oversaturated and that it's been overhyped and there's not really going to be any jobs by the time you get done with it, I'd actually argue that the opposite is probably true, that we have plenty of problems to solve and we have the automation to do a lot of it without having human hands interfere that often. And we are going to attack those problems as we have the ability to. So I think you're going to be okay getting into STEM. In fact, I think you're going to strive. Okay? All right. So I hope you guys liked this video. I hope it answered some questions. It's definitely not more of an opinion, if anything else, but It's just sort of the way I see things. If you like this video, please give me a like. If you really like it, please subscribe. I am getting kind of close to 1,000 and I would really like to hit that. And have a good night.